best deal I ever made. Here is a guide what to look for when you're buying a used 4x4, or in this case a Land Cruiser. First thing, we will talk a little bit about the history of this Land Cruiser, so it makes more sense in terms of the checklist. This car is a first owner car. It's pretty rare, I mean, especially for Land Cruisers. The guy who bought it is now in his early 80s and bought it when he was 46-ish something. He took well care of it. I mean, look at it. It's 40 years old and is still driving and is still roadworthy. At least partly. The first thing I do normally when I check a car, I mean probably you too, is I make a walk around and look how does it look actually. I mean, especially on the 60s you have always rust problems. In that case, I mean, it was painted, it is not the original color, it's a Toyota blue as the Land Cruiser of my brother. I mean, probably it was 20 years ago a nice color. I always look for rust. I mean, you see here everywhere it starts to crack. So that means probably it's a lot of Bondo on it. I mean, you see, there is a lot of Bondo on it. It's probably a 60 series thing with the Bondo, because they tend to rust so much. Normally they rust out about here on the front fenders. Same with the doors. So the underside of the door is normally completely rusted out on these things. Same with the back door. And also when you look at the wheel arches, I mean, you see it here probably pretty well, because the owner, let's say, scratched it a little bit on our concrete wall. So you see how much Bondo is on it. So you know the wheel arches are done at least once. Most cars I know they are done like 3 times, and there is like, it's Bondo art. Not a sidewall anymore, it's Bondo art. And like I said, 60s like rust everywhere. I talked in the last video about the 61 of my brother, when the part was with the frame, that the frame in the rear is doubled. And when you look down here, you see what I meant actually. You saw the frame? That's a thing not only, let's say, unique to a Land Cruiser, it is actually common on all 4x4s. Or boxed frames, or frames who have double layers of steel. They tend to rust out. I mean, especially if you buy an old 4x4, you should know how to weld. I mean, it is not that big of a deal to make such repairs, but like I said, welding is a necessary thing and you should know how to do it, so it is still a structural safe car. So as you have seen on the other side of the car where the owner scratched it, that is actually what I meant. You have here the wheel arches, that's the sidewall, and here, especially the 60s, also 80 series Land Cruiser, from what I know, tend to rust through in this area. On the 80 series Land Cruiser you would have the bumper all the way forward, so you don't see it. On the 60 you see it actually. It is a 4x4 thing, everything what is covered with a bumper or plastic or anything like that, it tends to rust out. So it is not a worst case scenario if you have a rust spot like this, or what you saw the rear of the frame, but you have to know how much hours you want to invest in the car, and also in terms of skill, if you are able to do it yourself, because if you drive with something like this in a shop, it will be expensive. The next thing I do normally is I go up. What do I mean with I go up? I look around on the windows. Yeah, it's just glass, but we don't actually look at the windows. We look everything on the height of the windows. In this case, rust up here. Common thing on Land Cruisers is that the roof is rusting through. It is on this one like this. It is not rusted through, but it already starts to bubble. So I assume there is Bondo on it. I have seen a lot of Bondo arts up here on Land Cruisers. So they were actually rusted through, but someone made a nice Bondo artwork. The next owner then has worst case. Next thing is, like I said, check the roof around it. If it is rusted somewhere, or you see it cracking or bubbles, always means, or not always, but in most cases, it means it is rusted through. The problem is here because we have a 60 series Land Cruiser, we talk a little bit more about a 60 series Land Cruiser. The problem here is you have some sealant up here where the roof sits on the pillars actually, and you have here a double layer of sheet metal, and when you put down the roof on a 60, you see there is no paint on it actually, it is just more or less bare metal. And sure, it tends to rust after 40 years. The sealant just is brittle and starts to crack, water flows in. Austrian case, salt water flows in, probably an Australian thing too, if you drive a lot on the beach. And then their roofs tend to rust out. So, and our next thing is, we look in front of the car, what you see here is the windscreen. The thing is, especially on a 60, is they tend to rust out around the windows. I mean, other 4x4s also tend to rust out around the windows. It's just a common thing also on the 80 series. They tend to rust out around the window, and you have to look for bubbles around the window frame. When you see on the outside bubbles, you can be 100% safe that it is actually rusted through. It is just my experience with when I put out the windscreen, they are always rusted through. Also a thing on these things is, you have here the front coil. Yeah, you have here the holes for the blower motor actually, who sucks the air in. And also water is running down through the slits, and also salt water is running down through the slits. So you have on the other side, on the 60 series, the inlet for the blower motor. And I had actually 2 or 3 cars, they were rusted through into the interior of the car. So it was always water flowing down in the car, and the carpet was wet. Yeah, and nobody knew why it was wet until I looked into it and I saw there is. That should be cold? Yeah, so check for it, okay? We walked around the car without bending much down or getting dirty, but now we have to get a little bit dirty. We have to look at the undercarriage, axles, everything is what is underneath the car. And first thing, like before, we start in the front. The first thing in the front, what is actually seen, is the front axle. So front axles on Land Cruisers, mine actually on every 4x4, or at least the Japanese ones with Japanese style axles. What I mean is closed axles, not American Danas. You look at the axle, and the thing on Land Cruisers is if they leak on the left and on the right side and you see already coming the grease out, you have to be, no, let's say it is sure you have to redo the axle, at least the outer parts, what is seals and gaskets and wheel bearing housings, it's just common. Next thing is, this thing has leaf springs. You look at the bushings or at the leaf springs itself. You see the leaf springs on these cars, they are nearly straight. So I assume first leaf springs. I mean, it is also very low, so just age. We started in the front of the 4x4 or Land Cruiser in this case. We go behind the front wheels and we look on the axle from behind. So what do you see on the axle from behind? When you look at the axle, especially on the differential, you see, is it dry or is it not dry? So you know the differential is leaking or is not leaking. In this case, it is not leaking. Also, you see the oil pan and where the transmission is attached to the engine. And you see, does it leak? Or this one does leak. So you know probably the engine back seal is at least, does leak a little bit. But you have to assume that you have to drop at a point the transmission to replace the seal, and then you have to replace the clutch and so on and so on. Yeah. The other thing you see down here are the drive shafts. Wiggle the drive shafts in front where it is attached to the differential and wiggle it where it is attached to the transfer case. And if there is play, you can be pretty sure that the bearings already have some play in it. There should be none, but a little bit is okay. And if there is no noise, there will be probably also not a problem. The next thing is, I mean, on this car, we can do it. I mean, you can do it on the most 4x4s. Check the frame. The frame, especially on Land Cruisers, old Land Cruisers, are a problem. They tend to rust out, especially in countries like Austria or most of Europe. And where do they rust out? From the B pillar backwards. They tend to rust out in the front. I have actually never seen a frame damage. No, it is not true on the 40s. but the Fords are 50 plus years old. They tend to rust out behind the spring hangers. So as I said, look on the frame. So especially behind the spring hangers, they are attached here or bolted here to the frame, and the bend upwards of the frame. 60 series Land Cruisers tend to rust out around here. You can put your finger inside the frame. There's a hole, you can put it inside, then you feel if there is dirt inside or the metal already starts to, let's say, expand. Yeah. In this case, this was a city car, so it never saw any off-road. The frame is clean in the inside, and also it has, besides the rear cross member, no frame rust where the spring hangers are attached. A thing also is in this area back here, as I said in the last episode where we talked about my brother's 61, there you have the C-shaped inlets in the frame. We don't have to look on the C-shaped plates actually, because they are rusted out. They are always rusted out. That's a thing I already know when I look at a 60 or a 61 that they are rusted out. Just normal thing. So next thing is, let's pop the hood. First thing I do normally after I pop the hood, I look at the fluid levels on the car, how much coolant is in it, how much oil is in it. But it's important that the engine is cold. I open the cap of the radiator and look, how does the radiator cap looks like? On this one it is, yeah, you have rust on it, and also the coolant is, yeah, a mixture between rust and coolant. What does it mean? It does mean nobody ever flushed the engine. Also common thing from my experience, that nobody ever changed the coolant. And also nobody ever changed the hoses, and then you drive in a hot summer and then boom! Oh, huh? And then it overheats and dies. The hoses are important because, I mean, the car is 40 years old. I know how the original hoses looks like from Toyota. I see that's the original, so I assume, and also they are, let's say, they started to expand and they're mushy and hard, and when you put pressure on it, you hear the rust inside cracking actually. That's a thing, yeah, in my experience. Everybody drives the Land Cruisers, but nobody does anything to them because everybody assumes they're made forever. I mean, they are made for a pretty long time and they are high quality cars, but still, rubber is rubber and rubber does get old. And then you have, on a hot summer day somewhere, when you want to have a nice day, you can have a problem and probably kill the engine. After you looked at the hoses, look also on the radiator. The radiators, I wouldn't say common to leak, but they leak. If they leak mostly on the bottom. Hard to see, but when you lay underneath the car, look up and probably you will see some coolant, or you don't see coolant. When you don't see coolant, it will be actually okay. Also look all at the hose connections, where the hoses are connected to the block and also to the inside, to the heater. If they leak somewhere, it's also very important. Next thing I look for is what is with the oil on the engine. So I already looked before I drove it actually how much oil is in it, but you can see the color of the oil. It is black because it is a diesel engine and they tend to be black. So, but
Smell my finger. Oh, what the hell is that? My ass.
When you smell the oil, how does it smell? This one smells actually burned. What does mean? Yeah, they were not really behind oil changes. Also a thing I know from my experience that nobody does a regular oil change. Afterwards, pop the oil cap, the filler cap, look at the cap. If there is any white, I would say, sludge on it, what would mean that probably coolant comes into the engine and there is a head gasket problem. Also common on the older Land Cruisers because the head gasket starts to deteriorate. So because of the age, and they are not metal, it is a failure point. And also look inside what you see. I mean, you see here the rockers in the inside. How do they look? Is there oil also sludge on it? Or oil deposit? If you see oil deposit in there, like a grimy tar-like thing, then probably, yeah, they were not really good at oil changes. Next thing is, look at the engine as a whole thing. How does it look? How oily is the engine or not? I mean, a little bit of oil on an older 4x4 is totally okay. Also on a Land Cruiser it is totally okay. I mean, nothing lasts forever, and especially no seals and gaskets. Then next thing is, look at the wiring, look at the vacuum hoses. How is everything attached? Does it look factory to you? If it is messy, there is a high chance that someone also already repaired something on the engine or replaced anything on it. If it looks messy, there is a high chance that, yeah, he messed up. Also I experience things when I tear down these cars. I mean, nearly on every Land Cruiser there is a bolt missing here and a bolt missing there. If it is a little M6 bolt, totally okay. If it is a big bolt, probably not so okay anymore. Also look on the accessories like starter, generator. How does it look? And in this case I see a new starter. Also over there a new generator. So someone already replaced it. We don't know what brand they are, but we assume they are good. Next thing is, look at the filters. In this case, the diesel filter is pretty good to see. Also the oil filter is good to see on these engines. Look at the filter, how old is it? If the filter is already rusty, especially the diesel filter, you know, same thing as with the oil, nobody did anything to it. Probably they just did the basic maintenance or just that it drives. It is for you a marker that you have probably to invest a lot of money in it. Afterwards you bought it for a way too expensive price. Other thing to look for it is, look at the batteries. On this case too, because it is a 24-volt car. Look at the wiring, how corroded are the cables. How is everything attached to the battery? It tends to be a wiring nightmare, because a lot of people did rewiring on these cars or put some lights on it or other accessories, and the wiring is just so bad that it is, yeah. If you have a bad day, it burns to the ground. So then look at the brake cylinder and the clutch cylinder. If it is like here, you already see on the clutch cylinder it is very low, and also you see it through the clear plastic, it is nearly black. What does that mean? Yeah, nobody did any change to the clutch fluid or brake fluid. So in case of the brake fluid, it could be bad, because if you step a lot on the brake when you drive on a hill, mountain, whatever, you could have a brake failure because it starts to cook. And in case of the clutch, it could be the same if you are a lot on the clutch, off-road especially. And next thing is, the cylinders on the clutch tend to get damaged. The rubber sealants what are inside of them actually. And then you step all the way to the floor and there is no clutch anymore. You could avoid this if you change the clutch fluid regularly, so you get all the grime out, but yeah, nobody does it. After you looked at the engine, start the engine. Let's assume the engine is running. Actually, it is not running, but if it would run, you wouldn't hear me. The engine is running. What to listen for? You listen if the engine is running smooth. If it is an inline six engine like this, it should run like this one actually is running like you can hear a slide up and down. What does it mean in case of this engine, a 12 HD? The car has 300,000 on the clock. It's 40 plus years, not 40 plus years, around 40 years old. What does it mean? In this case, it's the injectors. You should regularly inspect them. I say every 100,000. Yeah, it is a good measure to inspect them. They need actually replacement nozzles and need to be adjusted. The problem is probably the opening pressure of the nozzles or the injectors. I'm pretty sure that it is too low, and then the engine starts to make some funny things. It can, when you drive, go out, or it does run not smooth. This car actually has power. I drove it before. It has plenty of power, but it smokes black as hell. Also, when it is running, while it is standing, and I hit the throttle, it pulls out a massive amount of black smoke. That is an indicator that something with the injection system is probably not okay. I mean, these old engines tend to throw a little of smoke, but it is not a cold roller. Cold rolling is never healthy in any case. I mean, if you want power and the pump is adjusted to the absolute limit, also boost, it will cold roll, but that is a different case. This one is cold rolling because it lacks maintenance. And that is a whole different story than, tune the engine up to get more power out of it. The next thing is, we go on a test drive. Now we are on test drive of the landcruiser. So if you do a test drive, look, how does it steer? How is the body roll? I mean, in this case, the body roll is, let's say, extensive because the leaf springs are done, also the shocks. How does it steer? How does the clutch feel? Does the clutch have a point of resistance, or is it just mushy? I mean, if it is mushy, it is an indicator. In this case, nobody ever changed the clutch fluid, so it is mushy. That's why, probably, because the cylinder is going a little hard. Then, how does it speed up? How does the gas feel? How is the response from the engine? If it, go all the way up in the red line, so it goes over the entire RPM band smooth. Afterwards, shift through all gears, first up to fifth. Also drive a little faster so you hear, does the transmission make any noises? Does the transfer case make noises? Also, the rear axle, is she quiet or does she sing a little song? What would be an indicator that the bearings are bad, or the differential itself is loud. Just look how it drives, how it does respond, and if it does feel normal to you. I hope you enjoyed the guide what to look for on a used 4x4 or landcruiser. Don't forget to subscribe, follow us on social media, and I hope we will see us the next time on our next episodes, and I hope you will follow our journey to restore some landcruisers and other stuff.